Okay, so off camera I have removed the ribs as shown and glued in the side wall for the cockpit. Also glued in the front bomb sight. If you just, there we go, on the bomb aimer's position, and there's a little bit of photo etch bracing from the Edard set. So if we pop that in to the fuselage half, there, I think we can get that, begin to get the impression of how much more detail these sets are bringing to this kit. So I'm actually quite happy with the fact that I've gone down the route of using them. Now, what I do need to do is look at this side, and we need to, well, I need to remove the ribs, and I thought I'd show you how I did that. I've also been in and removed, you can see there's quite a few extensive, really heavy ejector pin marks throughout the fuselage. Now these ones aren't going to matter too much because there's no detail in here, so we can either paint the interior black or just do it basic interior green, and you won't see much of it. But in here there's a ejector pin mark. There's been quite a large one there and one here, so I've just gently scraped them away. I filled that one with some super glue and resin powder, sanded the back so it's kind of visible, but it's one time you get your cockpit and stuff and you're not actually going to see much of it. But what I've been using to take them away is something akin to what they call a jeweler's brooch. And it's basically, if you can see this, I'll get the focus on it. It's just basically a very fine pointed chisel, and they come in a set. So you've got a handle with a grub screw, and you've got a set of brooches from about 5mm down to 0.1 or something like that. Very, very fine. And obviously an Allen key just for tightening, loosening and tightening the brooch and the handle. Now, instead of gouging in, get that to focus, instead of gouging in that way, what we do is turn the brooch over the way on a slightly steeper angle, and then just gently run it down that raised panel line. You see it just peeling it away. Now these are very, very sharp, so you do need to be exceedingly careful and make sure you try and keep your hands away from the cutting direction so that you don't cut yourself accidentally, because they are sharp enough to do that. But you can just see that is rolling that raised seam away. Watch it doesn't dig into the plastic too much, it's trying to. That's why we're using that reversed angle on it, just to help it skate over the plastic, taking a tiny bit off each time until it's got to the point where we can just sand the rest away. Now, we're not really too fussed about the finish because you're going to be covering it with the cockpit sidewalls. And in order to get a good bonding surface, we do actually need to key the side. It's quite smooth, so we need to key the side anyway. Just put some scratches in it, just so the super glue has got something to stick to. Right, so now that we've got that done, we can go in with a cut down sanding stick. I've got quite an old one here, just a thin stick. We should go in there and make sure we've taken off all the high spots and blended them away, so we're going to get a good consistent bonding surface with the cockpit sidewalls. What I tend to do as well, I've got an old, I'd say an old toothbrush. It's actually never been used as a toothbrush, just bought it specifically for brushing away dust, sand and dust, resin dust. Right, quick check with your finger, nice and smooth, and dry fit. Always, always, always dry fit resin, because it may have warped in the pour, it may have been slightly inaccurate, it may not conform to the shape. Now this is, if you look at this, although it is quite concave, or convex, I can never remember which way, it's curved, but it's not actually fully conformed to the panel. You can see it's a little flat on this front end. So what I did with the last one is we lined it up where we wanted it, and I put glue along the back edge, held it in place up to about the middle, and then we ran some glue under there and pushed that down. So we basically gluing it in two parts. And what we need to do is we need to get that to line up with the upper edge of the fuselage line, and it will do. And the front, this front edge here, pretty much lines up with the front edge here, leaving enough of a gap for the bulkhead to fit. So this will be the challenge, doing this on camera. I've got some aerosol activator just off to the side, so you want to put this is quite older glue, so it's a little bit thicker, so you just want to put in there like that, and it will spread. And then you'll excuse me if I don't get it perfectly aligned for filming, because I need to get it perfectly aligned for actually building. Okay, when I'm happy, and being older, older super glue, it doesn't grip as quick. And I'm happy, I want to hold that top edge because that's the most important one. I'm going to push down here and quite firmly pushing that panel into the side wall of the aircraft, and then we'll just get the accelerator in and give it a skeet around, back to holding it in place, and just hold it. It'll take about 30-40 seconds to fully cure up. There's no point in rushing this part. The big risk you've got is if you let go and it pops off a little bit and then grabs, actually trying to recover the part to get it put down properly can be problematic, and you may end up damaging the part. So don't rush it here, just let the activator do its job with the super glue. Let it go off and conform, and then when we're confident, just gently release the pressure. There we go. We're quite happy, and it's actually fairly pulled in at the front as well. Now you can just see the white, the clouding effect that happens. And just check again. Are we happy with that? Yeah, I'm happy with that. That's pretty good. What we can do is grab the cockpit. We can check the fit. So I actually think this side of the fuselage is slightly warped, because pushing in the cockpit is definitely altering the shape of it, but that's actually quite a nice fit, both front and back. So don't need to do much alterations there. What I will do is, yeah, we'll put a bit, there's a bit of flex in the front of this. I don't know if you can see that. There, bit of flex there, so we'll just run a bit of super glue under the front and hold that. I'll get my applicator. So we load it up with glue. I need to be reasonably quick doing this because the activator still will work, and we don't want it to go off without being held down. So glue under, and then firmly push down, and we'll let it work. Right, happy with that? Yep. Now what I'm going to do is just quickly run around the rest of that front edge and just bleed in wick in a little bit of super glue, and then we'll look at what's next. So back in a mo. Right, so moving on from the fuselage half, so just a quick look again. There's a little bit of photo etch that's gone in the front there. So that's added a little bit more detail. The next call out in the instructions, move them up into frame, is this piece here, which is the pilot's controls. So I've removed that from the sprue. So there's a couple of parts to do. We've got the throttle quadrants, which I'll show you where that comes into next, so we'll lay that up there. There is the forward hatch, which is this piece here. There's a piece of photo etch to go on that. We've got the two yokes or control wheels that attach to the pilot's controls. Now we've got a little bit of cleanup on this. What we want to do is just dry fit this to see if we can get away with gluing it in place and then painting it with the rest of the cockpit. Now there is a little bit of burring that we need just to scrape off, and I think you can just see just a sharp scalpel blade will take that parting line away. Just being careful not to knock anything off that is actually a detail part. And for the age of the mould, I really do have to give Revell credit. It's a really nice kit. Just if you need to knock a gentle one off with a little more control file, check the inside. Taking it away beautifully. And then you can just use the fine side of a sanding stick just to get rid of any unwanted scratch marks or score marks, and to rub off any residual shavings that haven't departed from the plastic. Now, if we look at the detail on this, it's actually really rather nice, and that locates into these holes here on the side of the pilot and co-pilot seats, so it just clips in there and there. Now obviously when they're flying the aircraft, that whole structure moves back and forth for the up and down movements, and then left and right for the roll, pitch and roll, and obviously rudder pedals for the yaw. There is here part 45, which is a crutch lock that will be fitted when in not in use, and this is where I have to think long and hard about whether I'm going to fit it or not, because it's quite well, it's not unsightly, but it's just, I think it detracts from the work we're putting into this cockpit. So it might be that I'll be slightly inaccurate in my model and not have that. Again, it will also come down to how much is actually going to be seen through the cockpit windows. But what we can do is we can just leave that a non-glued fit, because it's actually quite a good fit in there. Just get rid of these partner marks here. It's been parted from the sprue. There we go. Now these parts just glue into these holes here. So a little touch of Tamiya extra thin, load the hole up, tweezers, and in it goes. Make sure that it is level on the top, because the model is obviously modelled with neutral control surfaces, so we don't want it canted off to the left or right, because it would look like it's okay, so it's not want to play ball at all. It would basically look like the control cables have parted as the yoke's off to one direction, but the actual control surfaces are all in neutral. So there's one in. Second one, it's got a little bit of flash on the internals. Nothing a quick scrape of a scalpel blade won't get rid of. Obviously, bearing in mind I've been doing this for years, so I am very experienced wielding a scalpel near my fingers, and I'm also willing to take the risk of little cuts and nicks. Right, blow away any dust. Same again, Tamiya extra thin, load up the hole. And fit the yoke. It's more of a steering wheel than a yoke, but I think most people know what I mean. Make sure it's square and properly referenced to the first one we put on, so they're both in alignment. There we go. Right, so that's that part, and that completes part 3 of the build. Moving on to part 4. So we're now moving from the front of the aircraft to the rear of the aircraft, and this is the twin rear tail, rear fuselage gun positions. And there's also in part 6 the instrument panel we need to think about as well, and we've got a couple of options for that. Instrument panel, we've got the plain kit panel, which has detail on. We've got the True Details panel, which is really rather nice, but I don't have any decals for it. Or we have got the Edard panel that is here, which is not bad. And there is the acetate that I showed you earlier on. There it is. We've got the acetate, which we paint white on the back, and that will give us an effect of the instruments. So we need to make a decision on what I'm going to use. I'll worry about that in a minute. But what I will do is I'll go and start gathering these parts here and separating them from the sprue, and come back and look at how they go together. Right, so parts are removed from the sprue. 3 points of contact to glue. The way I like to do that is simply just hold the parts in the correct orientation, and then from the underside, touch and flow Tamiya extra thin. Once the glue's in, make sure the parts are properly seated. Gentle pressure. Let the solvent glue do its job. Revell plastic really likes Tamiya extra thin. It also does very well with Mr. Cement S. Now this part simply glues on here. This is the ammunition feed belts. Make sure you obviously glue it the correct way. There are photo etch parts that enhance this, but they pretty much get involved once this is in the fuselage. And there's obviously parts to update, enhance the guns. So that was a really simple thing to put together, 3 parts. There's a few bits of glazings to go in, but I'm going to put them in once we've painted the inside. But what I will do is we'll test fit this bulkhead in here. You can see that goes in quite nicely and fits well. And this will obviously firm up the fuselage sides for final gluing. So we've got representations of the wing ribs there, but we've also got a stonking great ejector pin mark that you will see looking through. So we're going to need to get rid of that. We also need to get the final bulkhead, which is part 74. And that's actually got an aerial attached to it, so that's a part we're going to have to think about maybe removing that aerial and reattaching it once we're nearly finished the kit. So there's the last bulkhead, the interior bulkhead. So just quickly scrape away the screw attachment points. Any flash, scrape that away, and this top one here, and we'll offer that up. So that one fits in there, or at least it should fit in there, but there is this ejector pin mark that's halfway, is right in here, and I think that's possibly preventing that marrying up properly. But that one fits in there like that to obviously close off the tail section, and you can see that ejector pin mark peeping in, and that part goes in there, which will close off the center section like so. Do they lock together? No, they don't. And there is a toilet that goes on here, that round circle there. It's where the toilet is for the rear crew. So next thing to do then for me will be to remedy these ejector pin marks on both sides of the fuselage, and then we can think about maybe getting some paint down. So back in a mo. Okay, so we're back, and as stated, I've been in here. You can see a little bit of sand and dust, but we've got that pin mark filled and this pin mark filled. So the last thing I'm needing to look at before we consider putting paint down, I'll move these tools out of the way, is we've got the throttle quadrant to attach to the upper control panel, which is a resin extra part, and that goes on the top of the canopy. Now in the photo etch part there are pieces that are going to be used to enhance this throttle quadrant. Not really sure if I'm going to use it, to be honest with you. Don't know if it's going to be seen, to be quite honest. It's tucked up in the top of the canopy. I can show you on the EDARD instructions. So canopy. Okay, it doesn't even show you very clearly on this one. Oh, here we go. So there's the throttle quadrant. It literally is 2 photo etch parts, one either side, which I don't think you're going to see. And then if we look at this piece here, so there is the resin detail part where the throttle quadrant affixes to, and then that sticks to the inside of the canopy. Now I haven't got my Edard mask set, so I can't actually paint the canopy at the moment without having to mask it myself. So what I'm probably going to do is I might leave this 2 parts till later on and try and push ahead a little bit. Because it's on the canopy, it's something we can do later. Now the only other pieces that need to be put in on the resin set is this piece here, which is for the gun ring, and that sits inside the gun ring mount just here. So we could probably fix that because we'll need to paint it before we close it up, so that goes in there like so. And then there is a small piece of photo etch handle that goes on the inside of here that needs to go in, because I'm thinking we need to get this hatch in and closed before we join the 2 fuselage sides together, otherwise we can't correct for fit. So that's got to go in there on one side. We'll get the photo etch handle on the back. That'll also help align the nose. So that part's got to go in, and then the Edard instructions are calling out for this part here to go in. This is a small photo etch part which I keep dropping. It's really tiny, and that is this part here, and that's to go in basically behind the gun ring, right to the front of the nose. We can't put that in until we put the front door in. So I'm going to clean this part up, we'll get it in, we'll get the photo etch handle off the sprue and bent, ready to glue on, and then we'll glue in this brass last bit of photo etch and the gun ring, and that will actually be us ready for starting to put down a primer coat on the inside. So I'm going to get everything ready and stuck in, because you've seen how I've done it, and we'll come back just before we start paint. Right, so that is us with everything fastened in now. I made a slight alteration to this piece just to get it to fit with the piece of photo etch brass. Got the little handle on the door. Obviously we've got the cockpit done, the other side fuselage in, and we've got the waist gunner positions done. So we are at a point where we're ready to put down primer, paint, and do the detail painting. So it's quite a good point to stop the video. So if you've got any questions for what you've seen so far, pop them down below. I shall read them and I'll give you an answer back. If you'd like to consider subscribing, then that'd be really good. And until next time guys, happy modeling, stay safe, and we'll see you soon.